you today?
I'm glorious, in fact. As you're pulling up the slides, I'll introduce myself quickly. My name is Cullen Harwood. I am the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Semgrep and focusing on Semgrep Supply Chain.
Hey everybody, my name is Katie Kent, or I go by KK here at Semgrep. I'm the product lead for supply chain. I've been working in security for a few years, used to work on a developer first version of a SIM, and excited to share with you guys a little bit today about our supply chain product. We will have time for questions, as Chris mentioned, or you can just drop them in the chat as we are going through.
There's other things we're going to talk about too, though. First and foremost is the Semgrep platform, as well as supply chain, obviously. KK has graciously agreed to a phenomenal demo, and then Q&A. As KK mentioned, we can have those live throughout the chat, or throughout the presentation rather, as well. We'll also dedicate the time to it at the end. But we wanted to start with a quick poll. Thinking about reachability, and this isn't a full-on competitive intelligence question, but it does help KK and I fuel our obsession here at Semgrep, which is the position of Semgrep Supply Chain in the market, the value add that we need to chase for our customers. And so in that kind of spirit and mentality, does your current software composition, does your current supply chain tool help prioritize vulnerabilities based on reachability? So I believe Chris will put that live if it isn't yet. Oh, it is live. And we'll give it a second for everybody to answer. Cool. Thanks for participating. Thanks for helping us kick it off. And as we do think about kicking it off, it's helpful as we think about the mission of Semgrep, why myself and my colleagues, 150 of us across the globe, got up this morning to put our pants on, got to our desk. It's because we're driven by this mission as Semgrep, and profoundly improve in software security and reliability, not just as a great use of a word like profoundly, but it really is fundamentally what we are chasing and achieving for ourselves, our partners, and our customers. We think we're doing a pretty good job at it. Partly, we think we're doing a good job at it because of the way that we think about it. KK, if you go one forward, it's because the way that we think about it is unique. We think about it from an engineering and developer first mindset. But what does that mean for your company? Why is that valuable for you? It's because AppSec should not just be, and security should not just be another boring and for sure not slowing checkbox on the compliance experience or on the compliance list. By taking this developer first mentality, we wanted to build a tool that has security utility. We have customers that actually tell us back, whoa, this is the first time I've had to slow down developer adoption of a tool. And that is because we like to think of it as the developer's developer tool, or something that isn't getting in the way, but is enhancing, is creating that tailwind for your teams. Another differentiator for us is that it is open source. Sorry, keep going, we're not there yet. It is open source, used by a majority of big tech companies. But then as we continue to think about the differentiators and what makes us different, it's that there's one scanner for SAST, for SCA, and for secrets. That enables custom rules that make your code scanning actually have a high ROI. I do use that word actually intentionally. And then also supply chain reachability is enabled by that as well. The big stat that we're touting right now is a 98% reduction in false positives. KK will talk about that in a little bit. But it's because of the platform that we're able to have those. Now you can jump on forward, KK. I mentioned the platform, and I do want to take a second to go a little bit deeper into the value of the platform specifically. Everything is built on that same foundational platform, which provides a robust solution set for your business. And I do apologize if this is a little bit redundant, but I do think it's important for framing, again, not just us as a company, but framing a lot of the value that we are chasing and providing. And so that platform builds up to the Pro Engine and Managed Scanning, builds up to Code, the SaaS tool that I mentioned, Supply Chain, RSCA, and then Secrets, with the assistant AI-powered remediation above all of it. And the benefit of Semgrep Supply Chain being inside of this platform is that it's built on the same, by being built on the same foundation as Code Scanning and Secrets. There's a true native integration capability that's across all three of our products. It's quite different from a lot of the other vendors out there, and continues to be a major, unique and holistic differentiator for us. An example of that benefit that we'll get into today is reachability. I keep kind of hinting at reachability, but that coverage, while there are other tools in the market that have some sort of reachability analysis, we believe that we have the best coverage for reachability because of this platform, and available in 8 different languages. So it doesn't matter what your flavor is, we can scan it. Yes, we scan. Speaking of Semgrep Supply Chain, the reason you're all here for Semgrep Supply Chain and finding vulnerabilities is because of our goal. And that is not just to prove to you that I can read, find the reachable vulnerabilities in your open source dependencies, but because that is, again, what's driving us on the supply chain side. I came across an Ask Reddit question the other day, this deep thought process, and as Reddit tends to do. And the question was about what are you most concerned will disappear because of the next few generations? Meaning, what is the next few generations not going to take care of or get rid of that's concerning? And one of the answers, a quick reminder, views not endorsed by Sona or by Semgrep, are endorsed by individuals on Reddit, was open source. Open source impacts my job. It impacts everybody's software. We use it day to day, et cetera, et cetera. There's not enough people developing. And 80 comments later, it did bring this moment of Semgrep Supply Chain is not where they landed, but where I landed, is critical, not just because we reduce noise and help you triage your problems, which we'll get into, and all those other great things, but because we do need open source software. And if you think about the companies that are running Semgrep Supply Chain and how much, KK, if you move forward one, how dependent everybody is on open source software. Did I freeze or did KK freeze? There we go. If you think about a lot of the people that agree with us, just a quick look at some of the companies that are on board with Semgrep Supply Chain, and thinking about open source dependencies across your entire ecosystem, what is it that we're actually doing for these partners? And how are they utilizing Semgrep Supply Chain? For us, we are changing the way that they think about their security posture. If you go one to the next one. One way to frame it is that we want to focus on our time to findings and what that actually looks like. By taking an end-to-end approach on supply chain security, we're empowering AppSec teams to holistically view, report, correct, triage their vulnerabilities. And what that actually looks like as you move through kind of this flow chart is, and what an actual execution of that is can we reliably and efficiently scan projects and parse dependencies? We can automatically triage as many of those as possible. That builds developer trust and helps AppSec teams be confident putting things into both comment and block. You think about the way that guardrails are then applied as well. So as basic as setting up comment and block developers, as complicated as auto remediation and package health in context. There's things like dependency search and SBOM export and reporting to be able to show the efficiency, not just within our platform, but also via APIs to bring that data set into whatever it is you're looking for, or rather, however it is you're managing your data. There's all kinds of things that we're doing and, again, obsessing over on that end-to-end supply chain security to be able to bring forward into our customers' security posture.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that intro, Colin. I wanted to speak a little bit about what the problem is that we're solving in Semgrep Supply Chain. So the problem that we're solving is that there is an ocean of vulnerabilities, but only a very few of them are actually very important in terms of your security posture right now. So this is a study on the number of CVEs that have been published annually. And you can see that we're up pushing toward 15, 20,000 CVEs per year. And only 3% of those vulnerabilities are actually observed in the wild and exploited in the wild. And so that means that you have this kind of gargantuan forever task of updating every dependency every time would be one way of doing it. But kind of the point of Semgrep Supply Chain is how do we help you prioritize amongst that list of what are potentially tens of thousands of findings, depending on the scale of your organization, the ones that are actually most important to fix right now. The way we tend to think about it at Semgrep, and Semgrep originally was this open source project, has a lot of roots in developer experience, is if we have a clean developer experience, that leads to strong security outcomes. Our ability in AppSec to secure things is limited by how many developers actually fix how many things. And so what we think about is it's actually not that difficult to surface issues to developers. There's lots of tools on the market that can surface security issues to developers, but we hold ourselves to a bar of showing developers issues they actually want to fix. Developers, especially experienced backend people, like they don't want to introduce a critical security vulnerability into production and be the person who introduced the dependency that creates the opportunity for hackers to take down the system. And so how do we put in front of them the information that they need in the right context and not create this reputation that security is crying wolf all the time and asking them to fix things that maybe don't actually have that much value to fix. So the experience that I hear about from a lot of folks I talk to in the market is there's this ocean of vulnerabilities. You have all of this code in up to 17 different languages just within one company. When you're thinking about how many languages are in an application these days and acquisitions and all of that stuff. And then how do we help you find just a few findings that really matter out of all of those vulnerabilities, the ones that actually need action today, and help you sort through and sift through and find that needle in the haystack. And so the way that we're thinking about that is by triangulating the priority of findings based on reachability analysis, EPSS, which is prediction of exploitability, as well as the severity that comes from the CVE itself. And so I really want to highlight this theme today around triangulating priority and speak a little bit about how reachability first and foremost plays into that. A lot of vendors out there in the world say that they reduce noise, right? I'm sure that's not the first time anyone in this room has heard that claim. So instead of taking our word for it, I wanted to share with you guys the DoyenSec report. So DoyenSec is a security consultancy that I'm sure a lot of us here are familiar with. And they did a third-party audit. This data set was JavaScript, Java, and Python. And what they found was in this particular data set, Semgrep was only finding 2 false positives versus some competitors in the market were finding, in the realm of 70, 80, 90 false positives in that same data set. And so, relatively small data set versus the scale that, some folks are operating at. But if you scale that out and you think, okay, it's approximately 2 versus, let's call it 87. If we're talking about thousands of findings, that is so many false positives that you're going to get from another tool that you're just not going to get with Semgrep Supply Chain. And that's really kind of the heart and soul of what our product does and what it does differently. And what we're continuing to invest in is this ability to really reduce and cancel noise so you can focus on the few findings that really matter today. You can actually download the full report if you want to check out the details of that. I think Chris has that linked for you in the resources section of the webinar here.
Katie, real quick too, if you look at, when you download that report and look at it, one of the things that DoyenSec does is they go through and assign a time to investigating each of the false positives, right? Which is what your team's going to be required to go do as they figure out the noise. And the reduction, the reduction, not just from that 98%, but from a time perspective, goes from 22 hours at the most noisy down to less than 2 hours with Semgrep. So not just is it noise, but it's also literal man hours, woman hours, person hours, excuse me. That are
I appreciate that. I wanted to show an example like in the code itself of what reachability does. So the basic level of reachability, there's two levels to it, but the first one is checking that the function call exists. So let's say in this case, we have a prototype pollution vulnerability that happens in Lodash when you call the function merge. And this exists in versions less than 4.6.2. So you can actually see here in the code that, yes, we are importing Lodash, but more importantly, in the second part that's highlighted in red, we are calling merge, and in this case, passing it a malicious object. So this would be your code. And what Semgrep is doing is semantically understanding the call to the function merge. And the way that we write rules in Semgrep is very flexible. And our security researchers do a sort of mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive list of ways to call Lodash. So we have a really high degree of accuracy in the false positives that we prevent. So if in the other case, merge was not called, so Lodash is imported up top here, but then there's no call to merge, then that becomes a false positive, and we would triage that finding for you in the product as unreachable. You still have that finding in the product as an unreachable finding, so that it's there and you know that what risk exists and all of that is cataloged, but we do automatically triage it for you. What is unique to Semgrep is a next level of reachability. So I'm fairly confident that no other vendor on the market has this, which is the ability to also check that the function call is safe. So not just that the function call exists, but that it is called safely. So one example of a kind of false positive that this prevents would be this case on the right here. And I've just pulled a very small code snippet for you guys on this one. So we have this function is fully authenticated and the function is taking an authentication status. But later in the code, we're declaring that authentication is being set to null. So Semgrep can actually semantically understand that when the authentication is set to null, that means that it's safe to call the function is fully authenticated, even though the function is vulnerable, because the function call itself is not vulnerable based on what is being passed into the function. And one of the reasons that we're able to do that is the fundamental technology of Semgrep, which does power our open source platform and our SaaS product as well, is semantically understanding the code at a deeper level. So what this really gives you is the capability to automate triage. So you can kind of take all of the findings that show up in the platform as reachable, and you can say, okay, that's a issue that we have verified, and I want to actually block those issues from entering production when they're critical. I'll show you guys what that looks like in a little bit. You can take all the findings that show up as unreachable and say, okay, relatively speaking, we can deprioritize this. Some security teams choose to never action them at all. Other security teams choose to set a longer term SLA for them. There's different ways that you can manage it, but fundamentally, from a triage perspective, like these are less important than others, right? That there will be some findings that are marked as either always or conditionally reachable, or sometimes no reachability analysis if we don't support reachability for that language yet. An example of this would be if you use the language Elixir, we support that language, but not reachability for it just yet. And so there is a bucket that you do still need to manually triage, but there's a lot of the work that is done for you in the findings that have been sent to reachable and unreachable. Speaking of language coverage, we do have some of the best language coverage out there. So we have 7 languages that we cover for reachability as of today, and then we'll be at 9 by the end of the year, with Kotlin almost out to you and Scala on its way. And then there are a handful of other languages, about 6 you see on the screen here, that we support for supply chain. We don't support for reachability yet, but we do at least give you some level of coverage. And we're always continuing to develop our language coverage and talking to our customers about which languages are most important to them. The other piece of prioritization, the second sort of element of triangulating priority, is EPSS. So not sure how many of you in this room are familiar with EPSS. I would be curious to know. But basically, EPSS is prediction of exploit. So this is made by First. It takes into account data about recent attacks that have occurred. recent exploits that have occurred, hacking trends, malicious dependencies, and kind of buckets all of that together into a score and says, what is the likelihood on a percent basis that this particular vulnerability will be exploited in the next 30 days? So this is bringing in a timeliness into the prioritization equation. And a lot of our customers now are using this as a way to prioritize things that maybe are for a language that we don't support yet, or for transitive vulnerabilities, or things that are kind of like a medium priority, but how to prioritize within those medium priority findings. From EPSS directly, you can kind of see here in this chart that the number of CVEs, again, is just continuing to go up and to the right. But the percent that has been exploited has remained, the number that has been exploited, has remained relatively constant. And so there's just so many more CVEs all the time that are not actually exploited, but you're getting asked to, do something about and manage through that risk. We actually published a blog recently on this topic of how to triangulate priority between reachability, severity, and EPSS when we recently integrated EPSS into the product. And so this would be one very reasonable and defensible way of prioritizing would be to say, okay, I'm going to take only the reachable vulnerabilities and only the ones that are medium, high, or critical, and only the ones that are high priority, high EPSS score within those, and call only those high priority, call everything else medium and low. So this gives you like a really clean way to reason about the priority amongst tens of thousands of findings, if that is the situation that you're in. Or even if you only have 100 findings, you can very quickly get down to the 2 that matter the most right now. And then that gives you a lot of clarity to provide to the development team and say, out of the X hundred findings that we do have, this is like in the 1% of how important they are. And then that really helps with building trust with the development team that you're asking them to fix what's important. I want to actually show you what some of this looks like in the product itself and how that manifests. So let me show you a little bit around Semgrep Supply Chain. So here we're in the Semgrep product. For those of you who've seen it before, it will look very familiar. And I've clicked into the supply chain tab here on the left. And what you can see here is you land on the vulnerabilities tab in the product. And this is a grouped view of all of your vulnerabilities. So you can see here the ability to actually filter by, let's say, only reachable findings. So this is going to give me just 3 findings that have code analysis that says that they are reachable. And so these are much more important than the other ones. You can also see the ability, as I was talking about, to filter by EPSS, high, medium, and low, by severity, critical, high, medium, low. I don't happen to have that many repositories in this particular instance of Semgrep, but if you, as many as you do, you can figure down, okay, I want to just focus on reachable, high EPSS, and high severity, and then you really have a clean view into what things are most important right now. And on the flip side, filter down to low, transitive, low probability EPSS, and unreachable, and you can probably make a pretty clear case that the amount of work required to remediate those kind of vulnerabilities is actually greater than the risk that they represent to the business. These vulnerabilities are all coming from our advisories, which you can find in the advisories tab. So those are akin to rules in a SaaS product, if you're more familiar with that. And so those are coming from GitHub, CVE database, as well as a couple of other databases and some proprietary things as well. And so all of that comes together into the advisories. You can just view a list of that on that tab. For the sake of keeping it snappy, I'll skip over to dependencies, which I think is a bit more interesting. So one of the things that I think about a lot is that moment as a security person where there's a security incident out there in the wild, like the next time that a log4j happens, next time a polyfill happens, you want to check right away, like, do I have this? And if so, where is it? And how do I get it out right away, right? And so you can do that here in the product through this dependency search. So you can just say, I want to know, do I have Alembic? And I want to check if the version is greater than 1.8. And then, oops, if I could type 8, that would help. then you can basically look and say, like, do I have this dependency or do I not? And what things is it in? And then that gives you the ability to have clarity into that really quickly. The third thing I wanted to show you is, or touch on briefly, is license configuration. Just in case you're wondering, yes, we do support checking on licenses. So a lot of supply chain and compliance products have a feature like this, and Semgrep does as well, where you can say, I only want to make sure that code that is being introduced into the product on a go-forward basis complies with whatever we have in terms of licenses, and that our legal team is satisfied that we have all of the controls that we need for that. So that we do support. And then what is probably my favorite part of Semgrep overall is the ability to actually just put in front of developers any critical reachable findings and actually block those from being introduced into production. And so this really comes back to secure guardrails and setting developers up on a path to make the code base secure. It's a lot more efficient than trying to fix issues after the fact. If we're actually saying, like, in the moment, this is contextual information to the developer. This is highly likely to be accurate because we've analyzed the code, seen that it's reachable. We've seen that this is critical. We can imagine we've seen that this is high EPSS. And so in that case, we're blocking the developer from even introducing that into the production code base. You don't have to block in Semgrep. You can also choose to comment instead. So in this demo version, Semgrep has actually blocked, but if we were to comment instead, it would not block, but it would still show the developer this information about this particular finding. It would say, hey, this is risky because of these reasons. Here is the recommended fix in this context. If you want to understand the actual CVE itself, you can go to this link here and check it out for your own acknowledgement. And that gives you as the developer the guidance of how to fix this thing and why they should fix this thing. But they do also have the capacity to kind of like override this to meet a deadline if they want to through an ignore functionality where they reply to the comment. There's a third way in Semgrep of developer notifications where these PRs don't show up at all. And instead, the findings are only in what's called monitor mode. And so in that case, you would see them in the platform, but the developers would not see them in the PRs. And so we really give you configurability in that to say, okay, which findings should developers see, which findings should developers be stopped from introducing, and how do we sort of best work together in fine-tuning that over time. The final thing I'll show you in the product is not specific to Semgrep Supply Chain, but it's newer, and so I did want to highlight it, and that is our updated reporting. So on the front page of Semgrep, you can see your trends in the backlog over time. How many findings have we been fixing over time? How many have been ignored? How many have been introduced? You can see all of your basic stats for all of those things. And you can also see secure guardrails. So once you've adopted and continued to add secure guardrails rules into the platform, you can see that breakdown as well. Excuse me, as well as finally, you can check out the most findings by product in this easy to use dashboard. Amazing. We'll go back to the slides for a couple takeaways, and then I did want to leave ample time for Q&A. So kind of the net of all of this is that Semgrep Supply Chain, we're really focused on helping you with prioritization. How do you automate triage with reachability analysis, identify high risk right now with EPSS, and bring those two things together with severity so that you can be really confident in the findings you're putting in front of developers and confident in your security posture. The second piece is secure guardrails. So we enable you to fix issues today by starting with those ones that are really high priority, but also preventing issues tomorrow by blocking findings or commenting to developers right in the moment, right in context, automating away a lot of the work that you would otherwise have to do if things were happening further down the timeline. I always like to mention what Semgrep is compatible with. So we do support basically every major SCM, CI/CD pipeline, and a few basic things in terms of notifications. Maybe over and above all of this, Semgrep does have a pretty robust API. As a product that was built by developers for developers, we really care about making sure that if you can do it in the product, in the platform, you can also do it in the API. That's not universally true today, but it's something that we've been playing catch up on and continuing to invest in. And a lot of how Semgrep works differently from a lot of other vendors is a lot of the APIs in our technology are the same APIs that are public. So you won't see inconsistencies between the API and the product because it's talking to the same backend in the same way. You can learn more about Semgrep through this link. I've also included ways to go to the SSC homepage. You can get started in Semgrep. The DoyenSec report is linked here. And we also do have a pretty big public Slack community where people who are using Semgrep open source, where people who are curious about Semgrep are asking questions of each other. I think there's a lot of different ways to get involved in Semgrep, but would definitely recommend if you are curious, just taking a look at the product yourself in terms of SAST, and then we can always get you a demo if that's what you're interested in. Just take a pause here if there's anything that Colin wanted to add or double click on.
No, that's all. That's phenomenal for me.
Amazing. Well, thanks everyone for listening.